How does a nation endure? How does it survive the deepest wounds of history? Uganda is a land of incredible beauty. It is often called the Pearl of Africa. Its landscapes are rich with life. Great lakes reflect the sky and tall mountains touch the clouds. Yet this nation has known profound darkness. It has seen the fall of kingdoms and the cruelty of dictators. It has suffered through long and terrible wars. The story of Uganda is a story of great pain, but it is also a story of remarkable resilience. It is a testament to the strength of the human spirit, a spirit that refuses to be broken, always searching for the light. The journey through Uganda's past is a complex one. It is a path marked by moments of great pride and periods of deep sorrow. We see the organized societies that existed long before outsiders arrived. We witness the shock of colonization, a force that redrew maps and reshaped destinies. The hope of freedom in 1962 was a bright, shining moment for the Ugandan people. But you know, this hope was soon overshadowed by political turmoil and unimaginable violence. To understand Uganda today, one must walk this difficult path. One must look into the face of its history, both the good and the bad, to see how it has shaped the present. Looking at this land, it is easy to see why it has been cherished for so long. The River Nile begins its long journey here. The forests are home to majestic mountain gorillas. The savannas teem with wildlife. Nature's abundance seems almost eternal, a constant presence through all the human drama. This natural wealth has been both a blessing and a curse. It attracted traders and explorers. It also drew in those who sought to exploit its resources for their own gain. The very richness of the land became a source of conflict, a prize to be fought over, shaping the course of the nation's history in profound ways. So, we ask again, how did Uganda survive? The answer is not simple. It lies in the strength of its communities. It is found in the deep roots of its traditions and cultures. It is visible in the courage of its people, who have faced down tyranny and chaos time and again. They have rebuilt their lives from the ashes of war. They have carried the memories of the past, not as a burden that holds them back, but as a lesson that fuels their determination. This is the story of a nation's unbreakable will to overcome its turbulent past and build a peaceful, hopeful future. Long before the arrival of Europeans, this part of Africa was not an empty space. It was a land of powerful and sophisticated kingdoms. Among the most prominent were Buganda, Bunyoro, Toro, and Ankole. These were not simple tribes, but complex societies with organized political systems. Each kingdom had its own ruler, its own laws, and its own unique customs. The kingdom of Buganda, for example, was ruled by a king known as the Kabaka. He governed through a system of chiefs and a council of elders, creating a stable and well-ordered society that was admired throughout the region for its efficiency and structure. The spiritual life of these kingdoms was deeply connected to the land and to their ancestors. They held complex beliefs about the world around them. Spirits were thought to inhabit trees, rivers, and hills. Ancestors were honored and consulted for guidance, playing an active role in the lives of the living. Rituals and ceremonies were a central part of daily existence, marking everything from the changing seasons to births, marriages, and deaths. These spiritual practices provided a sense of order and meaning. They connected people to their history, to their community, and to the natural world in a very powerful and intimate way. Trade was the lifeblood that connected these kingdoms to one another and to the outside world. They did not live in isolation. Caravans moved across the landscape carrying valuable goods like ivory, salt, and iron tools. The kingdom of Bunyoro, for instance, was known for its control over the region's salt deposits and its skill in ironworking. This trade created wealth and fostered relationships between different groups. It was a system of exchange that built alliances, but it could also lead to competition and conflict as kingdoms vied for control of the most profitable trade routes and resources. Each kingdom had a distinct identity. The Bahima people of Ankole were famous pastoralists, their lives revolving around their magnificent long-horned cattle. Wealth and status were measured by the size of one's herd. In Toro, a kingdom that split from Bunyoro, a strong sense of cultural heritage developed. These pre-colonial societies were dynamic and evolving. They had their own politics, their own economies, and their own rich cultural tapestries. They were the foundation upon which the future nation of Uganda would be built, a legacy of order and tradition that continues to influence the country even today. The late 19th century brought a new and powerful force to the region, the British Empire. Drawn by tales of the source of the Nile and the potential for resources, explorers, missionaries, and traders began to arrive. They found a land of competing kingdoms. The British were skilled at using these existing rivalries to their advantage. They often sided with one kingdom against another, a strategy known as divide and rule. They formed an alliance with the well-organized Buganda Kingdom, using its strength to help them extend their control over other areas, including the powerful Bunyoro Kingdom, which fiercely resisted the foreign intrusion. In 1894, Britain formally established the Uganda Protectorate. This meant Uganda was not officially a colony, but a territory under British protection and control. In reality, the distinction mattered little. The British made the laws and controlled the economy. They introduced new crops like cotton and coffee, not to enrich the local people, but to supply the factories of Britain. Farmers were encouraged, and sometimes forced, to grow these cash crops instead of food for their own families. This new economic system disrupted traditional ways of life and made the territory dependent on the global market, a market controlled by the empire. The colonial administration created clear and rigid ethnic boundaries where they had once been more fluid. They favored certain groups over others. The Buganda, due to their early collaboration, were often given positions in the colonial government and police force. They were sent to administer other regions of the protectorate, which often created resentment among other ethnic groups. This policy deepened divisions and sowed the seeds of future conflict. The idea of a single Ugandan identity was weak. Instead, people's primary loyalty remained with their ethnic group, a situation that would prove incredibly dangerous after independence. The legacy of British rule was complex and deeply damaging. While they did build some infrastructure like railways and schools, these were primarily built to serve the interests of the empire. The railway was constructed to transport resources from the interior to the coast. The schools often taught a curriculum that glorified Britain while devaluing African culture and history. By the time the British left, they had created a new country called Uganda, but it was a country artificially stitched together, full of internal divisions and unequal power structures, a fragile creation about to face the immense challenges of independence. On October 9, 1962, a wave of optimism swept across the nation. The Union Jack was lowered, and the new flag of Uganda was raised for the very first time. There was great celebration, and a profound sense of hope for the future. After decades of foreign rule, Uganda was finally independent, a master of its own destiny. The country had a new constitution that tried to balance the power of the central government with the traditions of the ancient kingdoms. Milton Obote, from the northern Lango region, became the first prime minister. The Kabaka of Buganda, Mutesa II, was appointed the ceremonial president, serving as a symbol of unity. However, this early promise soon began to fade. The political arrangement was fragile. The alliance between Obote's party and the party representing the Buganda Kingdom was one of convenience, not of shared vision. Deep mistrust remained between the different ethnic and political groups. Obote sought to create a strong, centralized state, while the Buganda Kingdom fiercely defended its autonomy and special status. These competing visions for the new nation set the stage for a power struggle that would quickly spiral out of control and plunge the young country into crisis. The conflict came to a head in 1966. Obote accused the Kabaka of plotting to overthrow the government. He sent the army, led by its deputy commander Idi Amin, to attack the Kabaka's palace. The palace was stormed, and Mutesa II was forced to flee into exile in London, where he later died. Following this violent confrontation, Obote suspended the constitution. He abolished all the traditional kingdoms and declared himself president. Uganda was no longer a state that tried to balance different powers. It was now a republic with one man holding absolute authority at the center. This event, often called the 1966 crisis, was a critical turning point. It destroyed the delicate compromise that had been made at independence. It alienated the Buganda, the country's largest ethnic group, and created a deep sense of bitterness and division. Obote's government became increasingly authoritarian. He relied more and more on the military to maintain his power. In doing so, he was unknowingly empowering the very man who would soon betray him. The dream of a united and democratic Uganda was shattered, replaced by a climate of fear, political instability, and military force. In January 1971, while President Obote was away at a conference, the army commander, Idi Amin Dada, seized power in a military coup. At first, many Ugandans celebrated. They were tired of Obote's rule and welcomed Amin's promises of a better future. He was a charismatic, imposing figure who initially presented himself as a man of the people. He released political prisoners and promised a return to democracy. But this initial hope was a cruel illusion. The celebration soon turned to silence, and the silence turned to terror, as the true nature of Amin's regime was revealed to a horrified nation and world. Amin's rule quickly descended into a nightmare of unimaginable violence. He established death squads like the State Research Bureau and the Public Safety Unit to hunt down and eliminate anyone perceived as a threat. Soldiers, politicians, judges, intellectuals, religious leaders, and ordinary citizens who supported Obote were targeted. People disappeared from their homes and workplaces, their bodies often dumped in rivers or forests. It is estimated that up to 300,000 Ugandans were killed during his 8-year reign. It was a time of paranoia and terror, where a wrong word or even a suspicious glance could lead to death. In 1972, Amin made a decision that would shatter the country's economy. He declared an economic war and ordered the expulsion of Uganda's entire Asian population. These families, many of whom had lived in Uganda for generations, were the backbone of the country's commerce and industry. They were given just 90 days to leave, forced to abandon their homes, businesses, and possessions. Amin handed their businesses over to his soldiers and cronies, who had no experience in running them. The result was a complete and catastrophic collapse of the economy. Shops were empty, factories fell silent, and the country's infrastructure crumbled into ruin. The legacy of Idi Amin's rule is a deep and lasting trauma. He left behind a shattered economy, a terrified population, and a society brutalized by years of state-sponsored violence. His regime inflamed ethnic tensions, as he favored his own Kakwa ethnic group and viciously persecuted others, like the Acholi and Langi. Even after he was finally overthrown in 1979 by a combined force of Tanzanian soldiers and Ugandan exiles, the scars remained. The nation was broken, not just economically, but psychologically. The years of terror had taught a terrible lesson in survival, but it also left a legacy of fear and mistrust that would haunt Uganda for decades to come. The fall of Idi Amin in 1979 did not bring immediate peace. Instead, it created a power vacuum that led to more chaos and bloodshed. A series of unstable governments followed, each failing to unite the fractured country. Milton Obote returned from exile and controversially won the 1980 election, an election many believed was rigged. His return to power marked the beginning of another brutal conflict. In the central region, particularly in an area known as the Luwero Triangle, a guerrilla war began. A new rebel leader, Yoweri Museveni, and his National Resistance Army, or NRA, fought a bitter war against Obote's government. The war in the Luwero Triangle was devastating. Obote's army responded to the insurgency with extreme brutality, killing tens of thousands of civilians in an attempt to crush the rebellion. The violence of this period rivaled that of the Amin years. Meanwhile, Museveni's NRA was gaining strength, presenting itself as a disciplined force that would restore order and dignity to Uganda. After 5 long years of fighting, Museveni's forces finally captured the capital, Kampala, in January 1986. He was sworn in as president, promising a fundamental change and an end to the cycles of violence that had plagued the nation since independence. While Museveni brought a measure of stability to the south and central parts of the country, a new and horrific conflict was emerging in the north. A rebel group called the Lord's Resistance Army, led by the fanatical Joseph Kony, began a reign of terror. The LRA was known for its extreme cruelty, particularly its practice of abducting children. Boys were forced to become child soldiers, and girls were forced into sexual slavery. For over 2 decades, the LRA waged a brutal war against the Ugandan government and its own people, the Acholi, creating a humanitarian crisis and displacing millions from their homes. The war in the north left deep wounds that are still healing today. It created a stark contrast between the relative peace and development in the south and the persistent suffering in the north. Museveni's government struggled for years to defeat the LRA, which eventually moved out of Uganda and into neighboring countries. The long conflict highlighted the immense challenge of building a truly unified nation. While Museveni had succeeded in ending the chaos in much of the country, the fight for a complete and lasting peace was a long and painful struggle, a reminder of how difficult it is to mend a nation so deeply broken by its past. Today, Uganda stands at a crossroads. a place where the shadows of the past meet the bright light of future possibilities. The country has experienced significant economic growth over the past 2 decades. The streets of Kampala are bustling with energy and commerce. New roads, bridges, and buildings are changing the landscape of the nation, signs of progress and investment. The discovery of oil has brought with it the promise of new wealth, though also concerns about how this wealth will be managed. For many Ugandans, life is more stable and predictable than it has been for generations, a hard-won peace that is cherished deeply. However, significant challenges remain. President Museveni, who brought an end to so much chaos, has now been in power for nearly 4 decades. This long tenure has raised serious concerns about democracy and human rights. Opposition politicians and activists often face harassment and arrest, and the space for political dissent appears to be shrinking. The promise of a fundamental change has, for some, been replaced by the reality of a political system dominated by one man and one party. Balancing the need for stability with the demand for greater freedom and democratic choice is one of the most critical challenges facing Uganda today. Beneath the political surface, a powerful social transformation is underway. Uganda is one of the youngest countries in the world with a huge population of young people who are connected, creative, and eager for change. Armed with smartphones and social media, this new generation is finding its voice. They are artists, entrepreneurs, and activists who are redefining what it means to be Ugandan. They are blending traditional culture with global influences, creating a vibrant new cultural scene in music, fashion, and technology. This youthful energy is perhaps the nation's greatest resource, a powerful force for innovation and progress. The story of Uganda is one of profound contrasts. It is a land of great tragedy and enduring tradition, of immense suffering and incredible strength. It is a nation that has walked through the darkest valleys of human history, yet has never lost its capacity for hope. The journey is far from over. There are still many obstacles to overcome on the path to a truly prosperous and democratic future. But the resilience of the Ugandan people, their unbreakable will to move forward, is the most powerful story of all. It is a story of survival, a story of hope, and a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to rebuild, to innovate, and to dream of a better dawn.